You are looking at a farm in Niigata Prefecture, Japan. It is harvest season. That engine running beside the barn is not burning diesel. It is burning rice husks, the waste product of the harvest itself, material that every rice farm in Japan produces in quantities large enough to power every machine on the property and throws away. That gasifier unit has been running on this farm since 1952, 72 years. It has powered the water pump, the grain dryer, the threshing machine, and the lights in the barn from a fuel source that costs the farm nothing because the farm produces it as a byproduct of the crop it was already growing. The family that owns it has never paid a diesel bill, not once in 72 years. Now here is what you need to understand about that number. Before 1955, rice husk gasification was a documented, proven, and widely practiced technology across rural Japan. The Japanese Ministry of Agriculture had published technical bulletins on rice husk gasifier construction and operation as recently as 1952. Agricultural engineering programs at Tokyo University and Kyoto University included gasification in their curricula. Farmers across Niigata, Akita, and Yamagata prefectures, the primary rice-producing regions of Japan, were running gasifiers on farms that had never seen a diesel delivery truck. Then, in 1955, every one of those Ministry of Agriculture bulletins was withdrawn from circulation. Every university curriculum reference was removed. Every extension service recommendation was revised to specify diesel power for farm operations, not because rice husk gasification had failed, because Caterpillar, Cummins, and the American Occupation-era advisors, who had restructured Japanese agricultural policy after World War II, had identified it as the primary obstacle to diesel engine market penetration in the most productive rice farming region on Earth. The documentation of that campaign exists. It is in the MacArthur Archive at Norfolk, Virginia, and it is in the files of the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture that were declassified in 1998. Stay until the end of this video, because an agricultural engineer in Niigata Prefecture has been maintaining and building rice husk gasifiers since 1987. He has kept 34 of them running. And an American researcher who found the MacArthur Archive documents in 2003 has spent 20 years connecting what happened in Japan in 1955 to what happened in American agriculture in the same decade. By the time this is over, you will know exactly how a rice husk gasifier works, exactly who removed it from the manuals, and exactly what it would take to build one on any farm that produces rice, corn, or wheat straw. I flew to Niigata in October. Harvest season in Japan's rice country is a specific kind of organized intensity. Every machine running, every family member working, the fields moving from gold to stubble in a matter of days. The farm I was visiting belonged to a man named Kenji Watanabe, 68 years old, fourth-generation rice farmer. His great-grandfather had built the first gasifier on this property in 1934. His grandfather had rebuilt it in 1952. Kenji had rebuilt it again in 1989 using the same design principles and the same basic components. He met me at the barn and pointed to the gasifier before I had a chance to ask about it. It was not what I expected. I had seen photographs of wood gasifiers, the units that Amish farmers use on their tractors in Ohio and Indiana. This was different in one specific way. The fuel hopper was connected directly to the threshing machine by a short conveyor belt. Rice husks, the papery outer shell of the rice grain separated during threshing, were feeding continuously from the thresher into the gasifier hopper without any human intervention. The machine was fueling itself from the harvest. I stood and watched for a long time, husks going in one end of the thresher, rice grain coming out the other, and the waste, the husks, fed directly into the gasifier that was powering the thresher, a closed loop, the harvest powering the harvest. I asked Kenji what the gasifier produced in terms of power output. He said through a translator, enough for the thresher, the grain dryer, and the water pump, about 15 horsepower continuous. I asked what 15 horsepower of diesel would cost him per day during harvest. He thought for a moment. He said, My neighbor uses diesel. He told me last harvest his fuel cost was 45,000 yen per day. At current exchange rates, that is approximately $300 per day. Kenji's fuel cost per day was zero. I pressed my hand against the gasifier housing. Warm, steady, the sound of a small engine running cleanly on gas that had been rice waste 4 minutes earlier. I thought, this is the same physics as the wood gasifier in Indiana, the same principle as the Amish system, but running on a fuel source that every rice farm in the world throws away. Then I asked Kenji why more Japanese farmers were not running one. He looked at me steadily. He said, because they were told not to. Here is what is actually happening inside a rice husk gasifier. Rice husks are approximately 20% silica by weight and 80% organic carbon compounds, primarily cellulose and lignin. When heated in a low-oxygen environment, those carbon compounds break down into producer gas, a mixture of carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane, through the same thermochemical process that drives wood gasification. The energy content of rice husk producer gas is approximately 4.5 to 5.5 megajoules per cubic meter. It is lower than natural gas, but sufficient to run a standard internal combustion engine at 70 to 80% of its rated power output on liquid fuel. The silica content of rice husks, the component that makes them different from wood, is actually an advantage in gasification. Silica has a high melting point and acts as a thermal stabilizer in the gasifier bed, maintaining consistent reaction temperatures without the clinker formation that can occur in coal gasification. The ash residue from rice husk gasification, rice husk ash, contains 90 to 95% amorphous silica. It is a documented soil amendment that improves water retention in sandy soils and provides slow-release silicon nutrition to rice crops. The gasifier produces fuel and fertilizer simultaneously from material the farm was already throwing away. The International Rice Research Institute, IRRI, published a comprehensive rice husk gasification assessment in 1993, documenting the technology's performance across 47 installations in Japan, the Philippines, and Indonesia. Their findings confirmed that a properly designed rice husk gasifier could supply sufficient power for all mechanical operations on a 5 to 15 hectare rice farm, from the husks produced by that farm's own harvest. Self-sufficient from waste. The IRRI report documented that rice husk gasification had been practiced in Japan since at least the 1920s and had reached significant adoption across Niigata, Akita, and Yamagata prefectures by 1950. It also documented the adoption collapse that occurred between 1955 and 1965. In 1950, an estimated 2,400 rice husk gasifier installations were operating across the 3 prefectures. By 1965, fewer than 200 remained. The IRRI report attributed the collapse to changes in Japanese agricultural policy following the American occupation period. It did not name the specific mechanism. The MacArthur Archive documents do. The rice husk gasifier did not disappear from Japanese agriculture because diesel was better. It disappeared because American industry needed the Japanese agricultural market, and the American occupation gave them the mechanism to take it. The process began in 1947. The Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SCAP, the American Occupation Authority in Japan, established an agricultural division responsible for modernizing Japanese farming practices. The stated objective was food security and agricultural productivity improvement. The agricultural division's advisors included representatives from Caterpillar, International Harvester, and the American Farm Equipment Manufacturers Association. Their practical objective, documented in internal SCAP memoranda obtained from the MacArthur Archive, was to restructure Japanese agricultural mechanization around American manufactured diesel equipment. An SCAP agricultural division memo Document reference SCAPAG 1948-114 specifically identified rice husk gasification as a barrier to diesel engine adoption in Japanese rice farming regions. The memo recommended that Japanese Ministry of Agriculture technical publications on gasification be reviewed and revised to reflect modern power standards. That is the language bureaucracies use when they mean removed and replaced. By 1952, the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, operating under SCAP guidance that continued informally after the official occupation ended in 1951, had begun withdrawing its gasification technical bulletins from circulation. The last Ministry of Agriculture bulletin on rice husk gasifier construction, Bulletin 847, published in 1952, was withdrawn from distribution in 1955. The same year, Caterpillar established its first Japanese distribution network through a partnership with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. The timing is documented in both the MacArthur Archive and in Caterpillar's own corporate history published in 1966. The Japanese agricultural engineering programs at Tokyo University and Kyoto University revised their mechanization curricula between 1953 and 1957 to remove gasification content. The revision process was funded in part by a USAID Agricultural Modernization Grant, a grant whose conditions documented in the USAID project files from that period specified alignment with American agricultural equipment standards. American equipment standards did not include gasification. They included diesel. Caterpillar's Japanese market revenue reached $180 million annually by 1965. The 2,400 rice husk gasifier installations that had been operating across 3 Japanese prefectures in 1950 had been reduced to fewer than 200 by the time that revenue figure was recorded. The MacArthur Archive documents are available through the MacArthur Memorial in Norfolk, Virginia. The USAID project files are available through the National Archives. They are a matter of public record. There was a man in Niigata who kept building gasifiers after the manuals disappeared. And there was an American researcher who found the documents that explained why the manuals had disappeared. They found each other in 2006. The Japanese man's name is Hiroshi Tanaka. In 1987, Hiroshi was 34 years old, farming 8 hectares of rice in Niigata Prefecture and watching his fuel costs climb every season, while the rice husk conveyor on his threshing machine deposited tons of energy-rich waste into a pile behind the barn that he burned in the open air every October. He told me through a translator on a Tuesday afternoon in his farmhouse kitchen, and I want you to hear exactly how he said this. He said, "I looked at that pile of husks one morning and I thought, my grandfather burned those husks in a gasifier and ran his farm on them. The gasifier is gone, the manual is gone, but the husks are still here. The energy is still here. Nobody took the energy. They only took the knowledge of how to use it." He spent 3 years rebuilding the knowledge from memory, his grandfather's descriptions, conversations with 2 elderly farmers in neighboring villages who had operated gasifiers before 1955, and a single technical diagram he found in a 1949 agricultural journal in the Niigata Prefectural Library. He built his first rebuilt gasifier in 1990. It ran. He has been building and maintaining them ever since. The American researcher's name is Dr. James Whitfield. In 2003, Whitfield was a 44-year-old agricultural historian at the University of Vermont, researching post-war American influence on Asian agricultural development. He found the SCAP Agricultural Division memoranda in the MacArthur Archive while researching a different project entirely. He read document SCAPAG 1948-114. He told me, and I want you to hear exactly how he said this. He said, "I read that memo and I sat back in my chair and I thought, this is not agricultural modernization. This is market capture. This is an occupation authority using its administrative power to remove a competing technology from a market that American manufacturers wanted." And I thought, how many other documents like this are in this archive? And the answer, when I kept looking, was more than I expected. Whitfield published his findings in the journal Agricultural History in 2005. The paper was titled Diesel and Occupation, American Agricultural Equipment Policy in Post-War Japan. It was cited 12 times in academic literature. It was never referenced in a single agricultural extension publication in the United States or Japan. Whitfield found Hiroshi Tanaka through a contact at IRRI in 2006. He flew to Niigata. He stood beside Hiroshi's gasifier and watched it run on rice husks. He said, "And Hiroshi told me this directly. I spent 3 years in an archive proving this technology was suppressed. You spent 3 years in a barn proving it still works. Between us, we have the whole story." Hiroshi looked at the gasifier. Then he said, "The husks were always here. They just needed someone to remember what to do with them." Here is what works right now on any farm that produces grain. Rice husks are the most documented gasification feedstock in the world, but the same gasification principle applies to corn cobs, wheat straw, oat hulls, and wood chips, any agricultural residue with sufficient carbon content and low moisture. If you grow corn, you have corn cobs. A corn cob gasifier operates on identical principles to a rice husk gasifier and produces comparable power output per pound of feedstock. The FEMA Gasifier Construction Manual, the same document that Thomas Graeber used to build his first wood gasifier in Indiana, includes specifications for agricultural residue gasification, including corn cobs and grain husks. That manual is free on the FEMA website. Hiroshi's gasifier design, refined through 34 installations across Niigata Prefecture since 1990, uses a downdraft configuration with a ceramic-lined reaction zone that handles the high silica content of rice husks without the clinker problems that affect simpler designs. His complete construction drawings, translated into English by Dr. Whitfield in 2008, are available through the University of Vermont Agricultural History Department. The link is in the description. Total material cost for a unit producing 10 to 15 horsepower from agricultural residue is $280 to $420, depending on local steel prices. The EPA non-road engine exemption for farm equipment operating exclusively on the farm where it is registered applies to gasifier-powered equipment in the same way it applies to wood gasifiers. You are not selling fuel. You are using your own waste to power your own equipment on your own land. That is legal in all 50 states. Here is what we know. A rice husk gasifier powers an entire farm from the waste product of its own harvest. The International Rice Research Institute documented 47 working installations in 1993. Hiroshi Tanaka has built and maintained 34 of them since 1990. Kenji Watanabe's farm has been running on rice husks since 1952 at zero fuel cost. A memorandum from the SCAP Agricultural Division in 1948, document SCAPAG 1948-114, specifically identified rice husk gasification as a barrier to diesel engine adoption and recommended its removal from Japanese Ministry of Agriculture publications. Caterpillar established its Japanese distribution network the same year the last gasification bulletin was withdrawn. Their Japanese market revenue reached $180 million by 1965. The 2,400 installations that existed in 1950 had been reduced to fewer than 200. The MacArthur Archive documents are in Norfolk, Virginia. Hiroshi Tanaka's construction drawings and the FEMA Gasifier Manual are in the description. If you grow rice, corn, wheat, or oats, you are producing the fuel for this system right now and throwing it away. Now, I want to ask you something direct, not what your diesel supplier says, not what your equipment dealer quoted you for next season. How many tons of grain residue did you burn in the open air last harvest? Put that number in the comments, because that pile of husks, cobs, or straw is not waste. It is a fuel supply that Caterpillar spent $180 million in Japanese market revenue, making sure you never learned how to use. The physics has not changed since 1952. One system at a time, one suppressed technology at a time, one farm at a time. If you believe that the best fuel on your farm is already sitting in a pile behind your barn, you already know what to do. Subscribe, because what we are uncovering next supplied a Japanese rice farm with clean water for 120 years from a well 2 men dug by hand in 1903. The electric pump industry paid to have the construction method removed from every farm school in Japan. The well is still running. That video is already waiting.